Hello, welcome back to the Well-Rounded podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we just wanted to introduce ourselves. We're two lifelong friends sharing life over coffee and conversation. I am Dan.
And I am Tim.
And we would love for you to join us today. This is how we hang out. I mean, this is usually the way we do this.
We just talk about life, talk about our kids, talk about our wives, how well-rounded we are. So we're just so happy to have you here. We're going to start off today with a latte moment. And Dan, would you tell us what the latte moment is today?
Definitely. Okay, so today's latte moment is a drink called black coffee. Tim, have you heard of this?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so this is a great recipe. It's real easy to make. You simply get some coffee beans. You're going to grind them up, all right? And then you're going to pour some water through them.
So step one?
The beans, yes.
Step two is grinding them?
Yep.
And step three is add water?
Hot water, yes.
That's pretty simple, although my recipe is better.
Oh, what recipe is that?
You put your K-cup in the thing and press the button with the picture of a coffee mug. I recommend the largest coffee button.
I suppose that recipe works as well, too. But whichever recipe you use, the most important part is the next part.
Oh, what's that?
Okay, you're going to take the milk.
Yes.
Your oat milk, almond milk, steamed, whatever, and your sugar. And and the fancy flavorings, like vanilla.
I do. My favorite is lavender marshmallow.
Yeah. You're gonna take all of those things, and you're gonna set them aside. Yeah. You put them back in the pantry, in the fridge, because you won't use any of that with black coffee.
But will it taste as good?
Well, the tasting good is not important. See, the caffeine.
Guys, where did you go?
Dan, we've been discovered. We've taken over their podcast.
Somebody's been sitting in my chair.
You make it look like fun. We just wanted to try it.
We just thought we'd do this while you were getting ready downstairs.
You stay. We can't talk about you though. We need you to go. We need you to go.
Oh, do. Well-rounded.
Hey, welcome back. Now that those guys are gone, let's get into what we really want to talk about today, which is them.
Yes.
We're going to talk about them. So we needed to get rid of them.
Yes.
Actually, we are covering a really near and dear subject to our hearts and something we've invested a lot of time in and a lot of prayer in.
Yeah.
It's our marriages.
It is.
And your marriages and our parents' marriages and our children's future marriages and all the things. So we are going to just get into kind of best practices, things we've observed, we've learned, we've researched over time. Can you get us started off with that?
Definitely. And it's kind of, it's a fun subject. I think sometimes it's a touchy subject. So we want to be sensitive to people and just realize that, this sometimes brings up hard memories and things, but we just want to approach it with love and care today. And we just want to, bring those best practices to you. So yes, truth and love.
Yes.
So years ago, Tim and I, we attended a great marriage seminar, and it really challenged us that every year we need to do something as a marriage enrichment. And that was our first thing. And I would say that was probably within the first or second year of our marriage. And so we've been married for 26 and a half years, and you've been married for 30 years. So between us, we have a lot of years between us. Yes. And so, they just really encourage that each year you need to do something that's going to enrich your marriage. And we kind of took that very seriously. One of our first things that we ever attended was a Gary Chapman seminar, and it was very enlightening. If you haven't heard of Gary Chapman, he's written lots of great books, and one of those is The 5 Love Languages. Yes. But he's also written a book called The Marriage You've Always Wanted. And there's just a lot of depth of knowledge in that book, so I would really encourage you to look into it. And there's small group studies. But that kind of launched for Tim and I our journey of leading a small group. We did a small group for almost probably 12 to 15 years that it incorporated about 5 to 6 couples. And it started out maybe like twice a month. Then we went to once a month. And as our kids got older, it was actually very hard to keep meeting and with everybody's schedules and things. But we definitely enjoyed being able to do that.
And
for sure.
I want to just jump in on that because we received the benefit of that. And I actually, you don't know this, but I texted our ladies that were in our group before I came today.
Oh, really?
And they sent in their favorite things that
No
they
way.
are still applying. So surprise.
Oh, surprise.
And I'm going to have them in a card for you when we're done recording.
Aw.
So that you can have that, because you and Tim really have invested in other marriages, and that becomes like a multiplication where you're encouraging other people on their
I know. Let me cry.
I texted out and said, hey, Diane and I are going to record an episode on marriage and from small group and all those years. So those are still very precious friends that we love seeing when we can, but it has gotten even more challenging, obviously, for the structured meeting of doing a Bible study together.
Yeah.
We're going to get back. We're empty nesters almost. So we got to get back into it.
The group is kind of revolving into that next stage of life.
Where we have a little more freedom. But anyway, so throughout this today, when we're talking about some of these specific things, I'm going to be sharing some things that people said were there, that our friends that were in small groups said were their takeaways. Things are still applying.
Very sweet.
So many years later, right? So a little investment, a book, a seminar, a deliberate weekend away changes things for decades. It's not just, it's not there and gone. Maybe you don't remember every page of a book or every page of a study, or even have every scripture on marriage memorized or every relational scripture, but that investment pays off. And that's kind of,
and I think like if everyone can just like stop and think about like when you actually can get that time to do a date night and go out and just be the two of you. And like when we would do date nights, we would kind of give parameters that we were not going to talk about the kids or talk about family or things like that. And actually just try to like focus on each other. And it's really marriage building 101. Like it really does help.
Right.
And sometimes it's very hard when your kids are little, and we understand that because we've been there and done that. So, but be persistent and figure it out. It's really a good idea.
Well, if you think about like in dating, you have these different facets of your relationship, right? You have like the friendship part, you have the physical attraction part, the flirty part, all of those things. And if you starve a piece of that as a married couple, you're missing out on some dynamic of it. And so you may have one date night that ends up turning, I've seen a lot of people talk about this, like their regular date nights. Sometimes they're not all wonderful and so fun. And, you know, we've even had a getaway where half the time we were in a heavy disagreement on something. And I was like, but this is our getaway. I don't want to waste it on, I think we were disagreeing over the movie we were watching or something in the hotel room. And it was like, but obviously it gives you a chance to work through stuff. So even if it's not perfectly happy, joyful fun every minute, having, next time it will be.
Yeah, definitely.
You work some things through.
Oh, I agree totally.
Going into that. So
it's very fun. So, I wanted to share one story from Gary Chapman. This was going years and years back, but it definitely goes out to the newlywed crowd if you're listening, and just realizing that when you first get married, you go through that honeymoon stage and you're just like, they can do nothing wrong. And then that does kind of change and dissipate a little bit. And he shared a story, and I'll never forget it because it was about cabinets. And you're like, okay, where is he going with this story? And he was talking about how his wife would leave a lot of cabinets open every day. She would go, he would come home and the drawers were open, the doors were open, and he would be like, what is going on? Like, why does she leave all of these doors and cabinets open? And so he would bring a lot of friction. He would get pretty upset about it, and it would just cause some strife and not great times. And so one day he came home, and he, it was kind of building a wedge in their marriage. And this is newly married, so I don't know if it was 6 months or a year or something like that, but it was pretty new. And he said that one day he put on his clock and he timed how long it took to close all of the doors and cabinets. And it literally took less than 30 seconds. And he said from that day on, he realized that his marriage was worth 30 seconds. And that no longer became an argument or a strife or a struggle, but it became something that he just said, okay, this is something I have to do. Like, it's not a big deal. It was a really turning moment for me, not to say that I always left doors and cabinets open, but we all do little things. I mean, there's little things that we do that can annoy each other and get on each other's nerves. And so it's just being aware of that and realizing that your spouse is not doing that on purpose.
Right. And I may have shared this, I hope not, but I think I share this quite a bit with people, that reading through one of the books we mentioned in our prayer episode. So go back and watch that, because we kind of cover some of this. But praying for your spouse in a journey to try and be a better prayer warrior for my husband. Yes. I also discovered that there were just some really easy things, like closing doors, or that's not his thing either. But mine was things he requested on the grocery list. Oh, yeah. And I just would get what I wanted or what the kids wanted. And I was like, oh, I forgot your stuff again. I forgot your stuff again. You know, and he was asking for like 3 things, please. You know, it wasn't like a hard thing to ask for. But I remembered thinking, like, that's such an easy, thoughtful way to show him that I care about him and that I'm listening, you know? Yeah. And so it was, Dan, if you're watching, I might be still struggling with this. I don't know. I have tried to do better, but something as simple as that could be like turn into a big fight. Sure. Of like, I'm sorry, I've got a little bit going on trying to take care of these kids, and you know, that defensiveness that we can get. But there's also just some really thoughtful things. And I want to just bring up one quick thing, because one thing, one issue with marriage is that it's 2 people, right? It's 2 strong-willed, determined, I have my opinion on this, I have my perspective on this, what am I getting out of this marriage, what am I, and flipping that script and taking some time to say, what am I giving? What am I, how am I showing love? Not that you're not loving me enough, or you're not doing this for me enough. And almost every marriage book kind of starts with that, addressing that issue of someone feeling neglected, someone feeling hurt, that I'm putting all this in and my husband's not meeting me there, or my wife isn't doing this. So being able to kind of address and say, this is 2 people. When one goes down, the other has to pull them up. And like that you're going to see seasons of marriage. It's a long story, right? It's not just it's a journey. It's not a destination. Right. It's not just one day or 1 week where my feelings are hurt. Definitely. We've all experienced that. We've all felt like, could my spouse be doing more, or saying more, or thinking of me more, right? But looking at it as a long story and saying, we are in a pit right now, or we're in a desert right now, but we want to get past that. And I agree. And having goodwill, having that, we're all on the same team. We're the same team. We're not against each other. Yeah. Well, and someone had told us years ago too that marriage is about 100 and 100. Oh, I love that. Not 50 and 50. Like so many times you're like, okay, I'll give 50% and the other person will give 50%. You better meet me in the middle. And meet me in the middle. And it's not that. It's about each person giving 100% all the time, and giving that. And it's not a competition. It's not trying to outdo each other, but it's coming in and doing everything together. Because on the day when there's sickness and in health, better or worse. Those kinds of things, that's where the 100% needs to come in, because somebody needs to be keeping things going while the other person's struggling or taking turns with that. Well, we wanted to share some of our best practices and things. And so, Leigh Ann, maybe you want to kick it off with one of our books that we had in one of our studies, which was Love and Respect, Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. And this book has been around quite a while, but it has a plethora of great information. So good. So good. We actually, and Dan and I got to see him in person. Oh, that's great. He came and did a little mini seminar years after we did it in a small group. Yeah. But really cool, because he's addressing that passage of wives, respect your husbands, husbands, love your wives. I think it's said in the reverse order. But basically, when you're not feeling like, oh, my husband doesn't love me as much as I love him, his commodity, his language, his communication is in this respect category. And a lot of marriages, there's no movies, there's no romance books that are talking about respect for men. Yes. Right? And so it's a biblical concept. It's a biblical wisdom to apply that to your marriage and say, I'm trying to get him to speak my language. Sure. But am I speaking his language? Yeah. It's just like with the love language, right? So what you give is a lot of times what you want to receive back. But understanding men and women are really different. Husbands and wives are coming in looking for something different. And to then you go back to that Proverbs 31 passage where it says her husband is respected at the city gate.
Yeah.
Like that's something, the whole passage is about women and about a noble wife and a wonderful wife, right?
Yeah.
But why does that matter? Because that is what men are needing from us. That is what is going to feed and fuel them to do the things, that sacrifices. They have to sacrifice for their families. They have to provide and protect and do all these things. And so they're not wired like us, right?
Yeah.
So lots of good stuff in this one.
Male brain versus female brain is two different things.
But
you have to always
neat the way
that.
the Word of God addresses it. It's not just from books. It's not just from psychologists and things
Very
like that.
much so.
Yeah.
I know for me, we've had lots of different books that we've done over the years. And the Smalley family, there was Gary Smalley as the father and Greg Smalley as the son. And they do a lot of great marriage retreats. They do marriage small group studies. We've done multiple of those. And one of the things that Dr. Gary Smalley said, which is the dad, is he just covered things about retreating versus confrontation in a marriage. And it's hard because usually one person is a retreater and the other person is the confronter.
Each other. They marry each other. and that person's chasing that person down the hall. Talk to me.
And you even find this in your kids. It is kind of an innate thing, and it definitely, doesn't really change over time, but you have to learn how to adapt to that and realize, I think for me, I'll confess that I am the confronter. I'm not the retreater. And so, many years in the beginning of our marriage, I'd be like, what is wrong with you? Why are you just leaving the room when I'm trying to talk to you? And we did come through, some time and realize, how to work through that and how to get through it and not be negative about it. And so learning that about your spouse, realizing how you can build upon that is very crucial for sure.
We had the similar setup where I was like, what do you mean you don't have a response to this?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. And I was like, well, you got to say something. So don't say something you're going to regret. We went through that cycle where, what's happened is 30 years in plus 3 years of dating before that is there's an understanding that I need to adapt to thinking before I speak as well. That was a skill that he taught me.
Yeah.
And something that, yes, I didn't need to just say whatever I was thinking without monitoring that and thinking through that. So there's a lot. We mentioned Power of a Praying Wife already.
Yes.
Power of a Praying Husband. These books are so neat. They just have such practical things. They've been around. They're not new. I need to reread and see if the examples are like back before. Call him on the landline. I don't know. They could be really outdated. I don't know. But the concepts are good and the heart behind it is good.
Yeah.
So we're coming to you from these couple of decades of experience. So some of the things that
and what's really neat right now is when you can a lot of these, like we're talking about a lot of book studies, but you can listen to these on YouTube. You can listen to these on audiobook.
Now media has a ton of good stuff.
So there's a lot of resources out there, and you obviously check your source and things, but it's great to be able to utilize that wherever you can. It's not always just in a book, but there's
a current podcast that I really like called At Home with the Beveres and John and Lisa Bevere. And it's mostly their grown kids and talking about their kids. So even a generation younger than us, they have their parents on sometimes to talk to them, but it is their children who are parenting and young parents kind of talking about what they're walking through and what they've learned and what they're bringing into that. So there's a lot of good stuff like that.
That is great.
Yeah.
Well, one verse that I did want to share for this time today is coming, a lot of people use this as the wedding verse. It's in almost, every marriage book, and it comes from 1 Corinthians 13. It's the passage from 4-8. And it talks about love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, and love never fails. And what's really neat about that is we were at a marriage workshop one time, and they said, every time you hear the word love, replace that with your spouse's name. And it really changes your perspective on how you think about them. And so if you do go through that and you say, so-and-so is patient, so-and-so is kind, so-and-so does not envy, does not boast, does not proud, it really does change your heart, especially if maybe you're in a time or a season that you're not in the word or doing things, and that maybe you're having some strife in your marriage. And so it's really, to me, that was very impactful that someone taught us one time.
Yeah, and that love concept is a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
So there's even a verse that says God is love. Like, he is the very definition of that. So this is not something you can always just, I want to be more loving. Like, it is an outflow of your walk with the Lord to be able to give that to your husband and to be able to honor him, respect him in that way.
Definitely.
You know? And some of these things are really practical, and I would say they come up at different times, right?
Yes.
So one season you may be working on always protecting each other. Another season you may be working on not being so selfish and being more self-aware and not making it all about you. Another season might be where jealousy is trying to creep in, envy, persevering, those kinds of things, not keeping that record of wrongs. That's one that
no score
comes
keeping.
up. It comes up though.
No score keeping.
Like, you think you've got it, and then later you're like, oh man, I'm doing that again. You know, so
definitely
those kinds of things are good. So we have noticed in pulling verses on marriage that a lot of them are just relational. Like the marriage relationship is the most intense. It's the most under the microscope. It's intended to be for life. It's created to be a reflection of how Christ loves the church. That the husband and the wife's relationship. And so, but there are so many that you hear that you're going to see come up in any kind of Bible study with this. But I was going to share the Proverbs 16. 24. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul. And your husband is going to need to hear kind words from you. One of the books, I think it was Love and Respect, was like, write a respect card for your husband, and give him something that he can go back to during a hard day. During a day when you're just busy with kids and you're just kind of drop the ball on this, right? So to be able to get that card out and say, this is how she really feels about me.
It's a big deal
when we're not in the trenches, right?
I think that's very important.
On hard days.
And, some days it's harder than others. And I think encouragement that we can give to anyone listening is that, it takes perseverance, it takes time, it takes energy. There's some days that are better than others. And, I say to this almost to everyone that is a newly married couple, and that marriage is a journey and it is not a destination. And that means it doesn't stop when you get married. That just begins that journey of marriage, and how it's going to change. It's going to ebb and flow as your life changes, as you change, as your kids change. And so it's very important that you just kind of realize that those changes doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means it's a change, and you just have to learn to adapt and just trust in the Lord for sure.
Right. And we are kind of putting a spotlight on the benefit of being in community. That a marriage on its own little island is going to struggle in everybody's life and circumstances and kid things, because that's another season. One of the studies we did talked about like year 7, 8, 9, dealing with certain kid things. Year 13, 14, they were, one of them, I can't remember, it was like a joke.
I think it was,
you should not be allowed to get divorced before the 13th or 14th year of marriage, because that's really when it starts to get good. We were all like, oh
really?
Gosh, we're on 10 or whatever.
Wait a minute.
What's happening? But that feeling of seeing the long game with that, but yeah. So
we had read, one of our studies was called The Time-Starved Marriage. So it was just really funny about how that had so much wealth of information in it, because when we're having the little kids and we're having the activities and the schedules and the driving here and there, I mean, it definitely, you have a time-starved marriage. And so that intentionality that we've talked about is just very important to make sure you keep that going for your spouse and yourself.
Marriage before kids is too adult. It's too, I used to tease, like, are we just kind of roommates? Like, we definitely honored the institution of marriage and honored God into that. But we were so young and independent and working and finishing, school and that kind of thing, that it really changed a new dependency level when we added children into that.
Yeah.
And some big picture questions had to come up, and big conversations on what do we really believe about this? Because what are we going to teach our children? And are we on the same page with that? So some of that sort of, we couldn't have predicted it in those early years because we weren't in that season yet.
Yeah.
And so it's not about like having it all figured out, but having community around you.
Yeah.
If you don't have someone in the generation before
Above
you in
you.
your family, get connected with someone through your church or
A
your
mentor
friend's
relationship
parents,
is very
your
key.
friend's parents,
Yeah.
or somebody
Yeah.
who's walked through it and can say, you're okay,
Yeah.
you're not crazy. This is part of it.
You definitely
So-
need someone in your life that you can aspire to, you can look up to, you can kind of see how did they do it, you know, and you and
get
Dan
advice.
have been a little bit ahead of us, you know, through our lives and with our kids. And so, you know, you're about 4 years ahead on the marriage journey. And so it's neat to be able to see those things, the fruit of the Spirit for sure.
Right. And any way or time that you can do what Tim and Diane have done, which is invest in other people's marriages, which is to make time on the calendar and say, let's set some time aside for this. Let's do this. If you have that influence, if you're from a place of this matters to us, this, you know, we have the same issues as everybody else, the same, you know, goals as everybody else for our marriage, to be close and to do this, but we need to organize it so that other people get that too. Highly, if the Holy Spirit's leading you in that way, please do it. We're evidence of that.
I think as we wrap up today, we're definitely going to, you know, make sure that we put some verses in our notes. We're going to put that
Book
latte
recommendations.
moment, that black coffee recipe,
Oh,
wink,
goodness.
wink in the notes.
Delicious.
We're going to make sure that we, you know, just highlight some of the things that we've talked about, some of the books that we've talked about today. And we, as always, we love to get listener questions, comments, anything that may be on your heart. So please just let us know in our Instagram at Well Grounded Podcast how we can better help you as well.
We're
So
just starting
we're
the conversation
excited.
on
Yes,
marriage. Marriage
yes.
matters. It matters. It's
Yeah.
something worth investing in.
Absolutely.
It's good for families, extended families, communities.
Yeah.
Strong marriages bless everybody. It was God's design.
Absolutely.
So good, so
as we
good.
leave today, we're going to share our blessing with you.
Bless
and
us.
that is always so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you may be rooted and grounded in love. And we want you to stay refreshed
And encouraged.
and stay
Stay well
well grounded.
grounded.